All right. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Buzz Beat. This is Richie. Today is Sunday, December 10th, and we are recording this via Spaces and YouTube. For those of you guys listening live, be sure to submit your questions and we can look into those as the show goes along. I'll be joined by Brian and Spencer today. We're going to quickly recap the game against the Raptors on Friday night. We're going to share some trends that we've been noticing. We have, I guess, a quarter of the way through the season, and then we will answer a listener question about Mitch Kupchak towards the end. So we will get into that. Spencer, Brian, I don't know if I've asked you guys this question yet, and maybe Spencer probably feels strongly about this, but what do you guys think about the Panthers situation and the firing and all that stuff, and how that season's going? Spencer?
Yeah, not going great. You know, I was pretty optimistic about the Frank Reich hire, honestly. Like I thought it was it was very, very different from the Matt Rule hire. But I thought that this would be a good kind of reset coaching philosophy hire for Carolina, and that obviously has not played out to be the case. Didn't play out to be the case at all. Um, I'm not like I'm not lighting the torch on fire and ready to like raid the stadium like I think a lot of the fan base is with David Tepper. I mean, I think that he thinks that he's smarter than he is, certainly,
Mhm.
but I give him credit. Like the guy's aggressive. All right, he made a really aggressive, hire with Matt Rule in that contract. It was a risk. It didn't pay off. He traded away or gave the green light to trade away a ton of future assets and draft capital to go get Bryce Young. So far, that doesn't look good. But again, he was aggressive. Like, a lot of things have not gone his way. So it's easy to say this guy's just way over his head. I'm not ready to write him off as an owner. He's running a little bit like a business, and from coming from big business, hedge fund world, this is not the same. And he's going to have to get out of the way and let people do their jobs, much like we have talked about with MJ on this show. But I do think eventually his aggression is going to pay off. It just hasn't yet. So that's kind of my 2 cents on this whole situation.
Yeah, it's one of those things where he is heavily involved, but to the point to where like he doesn't really know too much about football, and he's making decisions kind of like willy nilly. But I think the fact that he is aggressive, that could pay off, like you're saying, Spencer. But I think he is probably the root of some of these issues that are occurring. And Frank Reich,
Yeah, I agree.
I was probably excited to a certain extent, but he laid an egg. I think his overall enthusiasm did not show up. He just seems a little bit too laid back, and obviously the firing is just taking, a little bit too late for anything to happen late in the season. And obviously the Panthers have been eliminated from playoff contention. And the worst thing about this, we've mentioned this before, is the fact that they don't have a first round pick. So that's what makes it even worse.
Yeah,
Last thing I would add,
the number one pick too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last thing I would add on the whole Panthers thing, the Bryce Young experience so far, I'm not out on him, but I have certainly the last 3 or 4 weeks started to come to a realization, like even if he had better weapons and a better offensive line, the dude just looks like he's swallowed up out there. Like I didn't expect it to jump out to me as much as it has this year. He's so small.
Yeah. I mean, first off, with a guy first off, I'm like totally checked out on the season. I have been for a while now. So take any analysis I have with a grain of salt. I mostly just see like the sadness on Twitter after the games end. But yeah, with a guy like Tepper, God, some of these dudes they just don't listen to anyone. Just no one's there to tell them no. And the Panthers are going to have to figure out like what the decision-making apparatus looks like. I mean, every pro team does. It's something the Hornets are going to have to sort out too under new ownership, and could certainly see a new front office, coming into the Hornets within the next 6 to 12 months or whatever as well. Yeah, it's just like you don't have anything in the NFL until you have like the quarterback situation figured out and like some stability, I guess, in the head coaching position. And like Tepper has tried a couple of different things and they've all been like really they've all been like a little trigger happy. like trying to instantly microwave a quarterback with Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield, and then finally deciding that no, the draft is actually the correct way to do that, which is like the right assessment, but then completely just losing out on any type of overall team building value by just lighting a bunch of picks on fire so you can move up one slot or a couple of slots or whatever. And then also who knows right now, Bryce may end up being good, but the fact that he looks like the third or fourth best quarterback at this point of that draft class and that's again, you used stuff to move up to get him. It's a disaster. And to have someone like me who was once a very dedicated fan, just thrilled and relieved to not have this team be a part of my weekends now. Yeah, it sort of speaks to just where I think the team has gone the last handful of years. It's not all on Tepper, but certainly a lot of that blame does land on his doorstep.
All right, let's get into the Hornets game. The reason why people are tuned into our podcast. Hornets did beat the Raptors on Friday night by 3 points. They blew a 20-point lead. I think this loss would have really stung if they had went on to lose this game. The Raptors probably only spent 3, 4, 5 minutes of this game actually leading, but they did outscore the Hornets by 10 in that fourth quarter. And I think, we were just talking about this pre-recording. I did not expect the Hornets to win this game with the way that the momentum was shifting in that final period. But by the same breath, I think you've got to be impressed with the way that the Hornets fought back late and pulled this one out. They are the only team in the NBA with 5 wins in games decided by 3 points or less. I think for the Raptors, Scotty Barnes was awesome, finishing with a triple-double for them. His defense is impactful. They also ran a lot of pick-and-roll action in that final quarter, and they were targeting Terry Rozier late in the game. So for as good as Terry is on the offensive end as a clutch player, the Raptors kind of took note of him and went after him and used Barnes as a passer, a shooter, a scorer to try to target Terry Rozier. But in terms of the Hornets, the one player that I want to start with, it was not the leading scorer, but I wanted to start with Brandon Miller. I think that when I watched him in this game, other than the 20 points and the 5 rebounds and the 3 assists, and I know that we've talked about this before, but the biggest thing for me is not necessarily the stat line with him. It's the comfort level and not having the moment feel too big for him. I mean, I know this is just a regular season game, but being a rookie, more often than not, he's making the right read. He's running the lanes. He's filling the court. It almost looks like he's a 3, 4 seasoned vet kind of coming into this. His relocation skills, the way that he drifts and lifts and the way that he moves is just very much a positive for me. And the last thing that I'll say before I pass it to you guys when it comes to Brandon Miller is that he also is aggressive when he needs to be. I know that he's a 3-point shooter, but he tries to get inside the paint, tries to draw fouls, and I think he drew 4 fouls on Friday night, which was second on the team. So when I watch him play, it's the stat line, but it's also the fact that he just looks so comfortable out there and nothing speeds him up.
Yeah, he makes really good, quick decisions when to make the extra pass, whether it's in half court, a scramble situation, or in transition. We've touched on that a few times this year, but he had a big Rozier hit a wing 3 on a second chance opportunity for the Hornets where the ball, I think Richards knocked it out. Hayward got it. He kicked it to Miller. Defense rotated. He kicked it to his left. Rozier hit a huge 3. And yeah, I mean, as that game was sort of spiraling away for the Hornets, one of the reasons why I didn't think Charlotte was gonna actually once they gave the lead, I thought they were cooked, not just because they're a really bad defensive team, but Toronto just kept pressing this button that was working, the Malachi Flynn, the Dennis Schroeder pick and roll with Scotty Barnes, and Barnes just cooking every different coverage the Hornets threw at him as a passer and a play finisher. But my favorite play with Miller in this game wasn't the little big 3 he hit late in the game when I think it was either Rozier or Hayward pick and roll, and he was on the left wing. He little shake action, relocates up the wing and hits a big contested 3 off a little bit of movement. But earlier, in the fourth quarter, or no, in the third quarter actually, with probably 3-4 minutes to play. Charlotte had a baseline out of bounds play, and they ran a little screen to screener action for Miller. He went up, he set a back screen, then he was trying to come off of a pin down to get it into the left to catch into the right corner. And whoever was guarding him, I think it was probably Anunoby, sort of bumped him off his spot a little bit. And Miller had to deviate from the design to be able to go get the inbounds pass as you're getting 3-4, approaching that 5-second count. And then the catch and shoot wasn't there, but immediately Richards goes over, sets a little snug pick and roll, and Miller takes a dribble or two to his left, gets not all the way downhill, but turns the corner enough, then hits a little runner floater, maybe a step or so outside the paint. Just a really big time play to sort of fight through the contact, make the simple obvious play of making sure that the ball gets inbounded and then going and making a play. I still think the live dribble creation stuff with him does leave a little bit to be desired. He settles a lot for pull up twos or pull up threes. He's still struggling with contact, but pretty much everything else is awesome. he's been, and even with some of that live ball stuff, he still has flashes for sure. But everything else has been really good. I mean, he's been excellent on spot ups this season. Probably the best on the Hornets team in terms of spot up efficiency amongst the high volume guys. But yeah, 1.12 points per spot up possession. He shot it really well off the catch, and he shot it well coming off handoffs and off of screens too. So he's been outstanding. And as we said, I think the other week, I think pretty safely a top 4 or 5 rookie this season in this draft class, which is very, very, very encouraging.
Yeah, the Hornets, they nailed this pick. And we'll wait and see with Scoot. He's certainly not off to a great start. And I think all of us on this pod would have made or at least a few of us would have made the Scoot selection. But we'll wait and see. I mean, who cares now? Brandon Miller's Richie, I think this is what you were kind of touching on, but his feel for the game, his IQ, I always call it just pace. His pace for the game. It's like he's just moving around at a very, very comfortable speed out there, right? And that's just the sign of a player that is comfortable, that is very high IQ, reacts as things are happening around him. His relocation skills, his catch and put it on the floor, keep the ball moving skills. Obviously his length helps him catch, the bomb that Rozier threw him, or the time bomb Rozier threw him at the end of the shot clock late in the game, and he's easily able to step into that shot and make a huge shot. And then on top of all those things, what impresses me the most about Brandon Miller is he's just a dog. That dude is there to compete, and he's there to make the tough winning plays. Getting that jump ball with Boucher late in that game after Boucher goes up, grabs that rebound, clearly has it, is coming down, and Miller just doesn't give up on the play, right? This probably sounds like hyperbole, and I don't mean it to be, but you just don't see a lot of guys in the league make that play very often. I think mostly because there is just a tighter whistle in the NBA, but boy, I love that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff this roster has lacked for a long time to me. So I love that Brandon Miller, really brings that. But it's just very evident that he's going to be a really, really good player. And I would, if I had to bet on it, I'm definitely betting this guy's going to be an all-star in his career, probably a multiple-time all-star. Brian touched on the creation with the ball off the dribble. He does. His dribble is not tight yet, not as tight as it could be. I think a lot of this is his lack of physicality too. As he puts muscle back on, as he gains more weight, I do think that he's going to be able to use his stronger frame to be a better on-ball creator. But right now, he doesn't have that to tap into. But look, I was not expecting this kind of production out of him this early, and all of a sudden, blink, last 10 games, he's shooting 50% from beyond the arc. So that was the one weakness thing we were pointing at, saying, when's the shot going to come around? What's here? And I just love how, Brian talked about this too, his catch and shoot ability, his off-ball movement. I mean, being able to consistently unlock that from beyond the arc is pretty awesome. So I really like him. I like him a lot more than I was expecting.
Yeah.
It was on tape at Alabama. But I think I got fooled by that system. I just thought that was such a tailor-made, up-tempo system that played into his strengths that I wasn't sure how much that was going to translate. And not only does it translate, but I also underestimated how much of a consistent competitor Brandon Miller is.
Yeah, I think he's been good in all the ways that I thought he would be good. And he's been weak in the ways that like I was like concerned with, like the half court finishing, the half court creation stuff. But the stuff that he's been good at, he's just been like, I don't know, like 10, 15, 20% better than I thought he was going to be. Plus, he's got the like quick decision making. Plus, he's just the best wing defender on the roster already. And so he knows how to play. You could have him on the court at the end of games. He can guard different positions. His defense on Anunoby was awesome against Toronto. Anunoby's a tank and a really good two-way player. I thought Miller absolutely like was up to that challenge. Yeah, I think I too would bet on Miller making a couple All-Star games at some point in his career. I don't know if he'll ever be like a star in the sense of, he's going to run a million pick and rolls per game and just you give him the ball and immediately a top 10 offense is going to spawn out of that. But there are a lot of examples of wings that are really good secondary players that can carry an offense for stretches of time, that use their size and their shooting to be the thing that really gets it done offensively for them. But that end up making a couple of all-star games that, I guess Mikal Bridges hasn't made one yet, but like that archetype or the Luol Deng, or just like there are those types of players that end up making a couple of all-star games, even if they were never like the 1 or the 1A guy on a roster. And like maybe Miller does get to that, but at this point I feel at least pretty confident in thinking like he sets up really nicely to be like an excellent second or third, secondary, creator, plus a guy that you still funnel a ton of offense through because of the shooting and the movement shooting and like the quick decision making as a passer.
Yeah, you guys both mentioned it, but the physicality is something that will have to come with him. And in this game, he had several turnovers, like travels and double dribbles. And some of that is tightening the handle, but some of it also is just the strength where he doesn't get affected, where he gets pushed off his drives and he starts to lose his handle a little bit more, and he has to, get off balance and stuff like that. So I think the strength will solve plenty of issues for him. And the last player I want to mention in this game, mainly because of the on-court stuff, but I do have a question about him too as well. And that I had to get him in here is Gordon Hayward. Finished with a team-high 24 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. And I think for as much slack and criticism that he receives when he does poorly, I don't feel like the same energy is returned when he plays well. And the one thing that I've noticed this year in terms of like just his ability in terms of maybe his strength this year is kind of getting to the rim. He was 4-4 in the restricted area against the Raptors. He's very crafty with those slow, elongated steps to kind of gather around the rim and finish around opponents, because he's not going to finish over opponents. But another reason I do bring up his name, and I would love to get you guys' thoughts on this, people are waiting for a trade for the Hornets, and I think many people think he should be the first to go, or at least put some feelers out there for him. And he very well could do that. Like, I think that his name will probably be, centered around trades as we get closer to January and February. But I wonder, considering his salary, considering it's going to take multiple players to come back and return, and these players are probably not going to all be expiring contracts like his, do you guys feel, it would be worthwhile for the Hornets to kind of look for something for Hayward, or do you think it's just better to let his contract fall off?
Oh, I think you have to play the market here. He's an expiring contract, so yeah, I would expect the Hornets to listen to every call that they get. As you've mentioned, Richie, the problem is just going to be his number. It's north of $30 million this year. What kind of package are the Hornets looking for, right? Are they looking for expiring contract or contracts that a distressed asset, if you will, in 2 players, around 14, 15, $16 million to make the money work and then get a draft asset on top of that? Are they looking for a distressed asset in terms of a young player that they feel like they can bring in and revive? So it's that's the question. What is their ask? What is their asking price? Is it a real guy, or is it just a few contracts that'll come off the books in a few years so they can get some draft capital? But I think that they're going to play the market. I think that Gordon Hayward will have lots of interest. He's playing. I mean, there are a ton of playoff teams in both conferences that he could help a lot right now. Every time I flip on a game on League Pass, I'm like, how could Gordon Hayward fit here? So I'm doing that exercise in my head a lot. But that number is going to make it difficult. It might even require a third team, because I think that making the money work is going to be hard enough for other teams. So finding that asset that makes it worthwhile for the Hornets might have to come from somewhere else. And that might be what makes this really difficult. And look, if the Hornets, by the trade deadline are within, and I don't think they will be, but if they are within 6, 7, 8 games from 500, well, history tells us, especially with the GM that needs to make the playoffs and win a playoff round to even have a chance to keep his job, there's a chance he might just retain this asset and take it to the finish line too. So there's a lot of moving parts here. So I would, to put a bow on it, and then I'll turn it to you, BG, I would say that the chances the Hornets trade, with all that said, Gordon Hayward is probably still around like 25-30%.
Yeah, I just think given the franchise, given the price tag, like given his contract, that he's not an easy player to move, and if there's not a ton of fire or interest coming from within the team to move him, it's hard to see. I wouldn't bet on it, him being shipped, but they should absolutely be looking to move him. It would be irresponsible to not be taking and making calls. Like Spencer said, and Richie just mentioned this too. He's been awesome this year. Like, he's been really, really good. 22% usage, 19% assist rate. He shot it well from pretty much everywhere on the court. You can play finish, but you can also play make with him in the pick and roll or in the post. You've seen the Hornets without LaMelo really leaning on both those parts of Hayward's game. Like, they're really playing out of that like mid post a lot right now with Hayward and PJ and Bridges for that matter, as well. But the Hornets have never, under this front office, have never really looked to make like these kinds of in-season trades, right? Where they're trying to like hunt future value. That just had, even when the front office seemingly had like more runway to work with under a previous ownership. So it seems unlikely that it's something that they would actually be able to see through and accomplish. But again, Hayward can help a lot of teams. The Sixers are a roster where I don't even think you get a third team involved. You could probably find a deal, and they could certainly use a Gordon Hayward type. You think he would fit very well as like the third guy with Maxey and Embiid playing at an MVP level again. But I could see a lot of other teams where, yes, you need to get multiple parties involved to actually facilitate a Hayward deal. So the only thing is, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and then Richie, you brought it up in the BuzzBeat like group text this week. Like, the Hornets are so thin, like outside of the top 5. I mean, right, especially with LaMelo out, like they're really just leaning on like 6, 7 players tops. That if you move Rozier and Hayward, which again I think they absolutely shop those guys, like they'll just fall off. Like, I mean, they're already not a very good team, but like there's just no one really that's ready to like come in and like immediately absorb those minutes. I mean, you can like push the possessions around and give Miller some usage, and I guess try James Bouknight and give Bryce McGowan more of an opportunity, but like they'll crater. Like, they might not be just like Pistons bad, but they might be so bad that like I could also see that also adding to the, even if they're totally out of playoff contention, which they basically are already, I could see them having less interest to doing that because the product that they'll be putting out on the court might just be so bad that they don't even want to pursue something like that.
Yeah. All right, so go on a ride with me real quick here, Richie. This is your favorite part about what I bring to the pod, if your feedback reminds me correctly. So why would you? Let's start with this. Why would you retain Miles Bridges amidst everything else? Why would you? To me, you're only doing it to retain the asset, right? Mm-hmm. He's an expiring contract, playing well. Gordon Hayward, expiring contract, playing well. Terry Rozier, not an expiring contract, and you're going to have to eat money over the next few seasons if you're a team taking him on. But very clearly, a player that comes with utility that you can put onto a playoff team immediately. Okay, so when are the Hornets going to have a bag of goods to sell like this again over the next few seasons? It's not few seasons. It's going to be another contract, another contract cycle or two down the road. I wouldn't rule out. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. This is totally idea. I have no knowledge of this or anything like that, but I would not rule out these new owners cutting ties with Mitch sooner rather than later, i.e. before the trade deadline, and bringing someone in or elevating someone already in the front office to make sure that these guys are sold. If the team were to lose 3, 4, 5, if they go out west and they get swept, all losses, you got to go in sell mode. And this is the last time this roster is going to have veterans that have value in the market for a while. Just look at the roster, look at the cap sheet, so I don't personally, I think we would all agree Mitch is not the guy to strategically move these guys and fill the cupboard or at least put something in it. But this is an opportunity right now for the Hornets as the trade deadline approaches. And there is an opportunity cost to keeping Mitch Kupchak there and not moving on from 2 of the 3, all 3. If they didn't trade at least one of these guys, I think it would just be a failure. So thought exercise there.
No, it's a good note because if they don't do it this cycle, obviously Rozier moves down, you could kick that can down the road. But the next one would be as far as trading a starter level player, veteran, is pushing the big button, right? It's LaMelo, Mark Williams. It's the guys that are part of the young core right now. But it would be
right.
it would be LaMelo. It would be the big reset. So this is the sort of way to, if you're going to try to really do a proper rebuild around the LaMelo, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams core, which I would like for them to pursue. This is one of the ways to go out and get more stuff that aren't the current draft picks you have.
And we're not talking about a teardown, right? We're talking about a mini or a mediocre whatever reset. So there is, again, I just think there's a lot of opportunity cost in not pursuing that now. You can't let Miles Bridges and Gordon Hayward, specifically those 2 assets, you can't just let both of those guys walk to the market this summer. It's just idiotic. And there's already reports out there that Miles Bridges will not be back in Charlotte next year. That's not surprising. I have an idea if he's allowed to walk to the market, he's going to walk straight to the Staples Center. The crypto, whatever it's called now. He'll be in LA because of his representation. We talked about this for Kemba, until our eyes bled, and the Hornets hung on to him, and they should have traded him earlier. They got to move one of those guys, if not both of them. It's malpractice if they don't.
Yeah, losing both Hayward and Bridges for nothing. Obviously we don't know what the future holds this summer. Yeah, it definitely would be malpractice. But I just worry about Hayward's contract and just what it would take to bring, incoming players back and if a draft pick would be enough of incentive to make that trade. And then trading Bridges is a little bit it's not challenging by any means, but he is he can consent or basically has a no trade clause because he's on a expiring deal. He would lose bird rights if he went to another team, so that team would not, retain that. But yeah, that is why I like you, Spencer, in terms of giving us these thought exercises. But let's
So yeah, bring something. I bring something.
Oh yeah.
Just Zach LaVine. I'm not saying I would love it, and we can talk about it more in a trade deadline pod. But
Okay.
I do think that starting with Gordon Hayward and some kind of deal like that, you can pretty quickly put one together. So
yeah.
I really hope they don't pursue that
Same. I mean, I'm with you. I just like I would say the Hornets are kind of a team lurking in the weeds there.
All right, our next segment here, we can do this fairly quickly. I posed this to you guys about bringing some kind of trend that interests you. It could be a team related trend, it could be a player related trend, it could be good, it could be bad. Just something recently that has caught your eye with this team that you wanted to note here on the episode before we get to the Mitch Kupchak segment at the end of this episode here. So I'll go ahead and start it off just to kind of put this out here. We don't need to spend too much time talking about it, but it's just something that I've noticed over the course of the season. And it's PJ Washington in terms of the way that he's been aggressive to start the season and the way that they used him in a short role with Richards or Mark Williams in the dunker spot, and he would attack the space and the paint. He'd either get to a floater or he'd hit the big on a dump off pass. It just felt like he was more aggressive to start the season. And maybe it's a direct correlation with Bridges entering, the rotation and how that's affected things. But I do find it interesting that his mentality, it feels like it's changed a little bit in terms of getting to the rim. I feel like it's shifted. So I had to look this up. First 8 games of the season, and obviously this is still 2 games before Bridges came back. This is from the opener till November 10th. He took 4.5 attempts in the restricted area per game and shot 72% in that area. After those 8 games, there was a stretch of 9 games that lasted till, early December. And he, instead of going from 4.5 attempts in the restricted area, he's down to 1.7 attempts in the restricted area, and he's shooting 47%. Now, his most recent 2 games against Chicago and Toronto, obviously this is a very small sample size, he's up that back up to 3 attempts in the restricted area. The efficiency is still not there, but, we'll see where that goes. But I think for PJ, I would like to see that shift to go back to the first, 8, 9, 10 games of the season where he can excel in getting to the rim. I think when you think of him initially, he's like, yeah, obviously pick and pop player, but he needs to be a guy that does just more than just that. Like he needs to be a closeout beater. He needs to be a short roll playmaker. He needs to be a guy that gets to his floater game. And I think that will take him a long way as being a guy that's more versatile. And so when I look at that stretch in middle November till about now, and the fact that he's not getting to the rim as much, is it a Miles Bridges thing? Is it a mentality thing? Is it a combination of both? But I would hope that trend would switch back to the beginning of the year. So I just wanted to put that out to our listeners.
Yeah, and in theory, you would kind of think him coming off the bench would actually give him more opportunity to do some of those things you were talking about, Richie, right? I do like PJ coming off the bench because he showed us that he's improved his middle game, that he can put it on the floor and create, that he can play bully ball, once he gets closer to the rim or in the paint. But I do think it's his natural in the NBA, since he's really sharpened the skill set. His natural, most comfortable way to fit into an offense is being a catch and shoot player, whether that's pick and pop and he's become very proficient at it, but I agree, he has more to offer. So I think that it probably does boil down to kind of being a mentality thing. And look, I mean, he's only been the 6th man, kind of moved to the bench. Hasn't been that long. So the player I was going to bring up is Terry Rozier. His game doesn't, to the eye test, it doesn't look really any different to me, but he's not turning it over, which he's never been a high turnover player in the league. His assist rate is astronomically larger this year, and just assists in general, than it has been his entire career. His usage rate is at a career high. And yes, we can attribute a lot of that to the LaMelo injury here as of late, but he is not a premier creator of offense, but he's getting off the ball. He's making quick decisions. He's just keeping the offense humming, moving. To me, he's making the simple pass and the simple play. And I think when Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, players like the PJ Washington, these are pretty high IQ, like get off the ball, keep the offense going kind of guys. So when Rozier can start that matriculation, I think it has led to some pretty good offensive games here for the Hornets. Hey, bud. Sorry, my kid just walked in. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, BG.
I guess Spencer's kid had a trend he wanted to get in here on, but I'll go ahead and cut in line. Yeah, I thought also just like to piggyback on what you guys were talking about with PJ. He had a couple huge drives in the second half against Toronto last night, including one where he went behind his back, like on a catch and go, and then I think he hit Richards in the dunker spot for his slam. He can do a lot of stuff, but I do agree, like his where he is best, at least with his team currently, is probably in like the spacer catch and go role, use him in some pick and pops. But he is so malleable because he can make quick decisions as a connective passer. He can screen. They do use him as a pick and roll ball handler occasionally. They play him at the 4, they play him at the 5, they play him with all these different player combinations. So he's just a really good young versatile player. But I would like to see him not be like totally shoehorned into just like catch and shoot or keep the ball move and roll, because like he can do some stuff in the middle of the floor too, obviously. I think I did want to touch on, and I mentioned this very briefly early on, and then I mentioned this, Richie, on the pod that Lee and I did after the LaMelo injury, where we were sort of talking like what the offense might look like early trends that we were seeing without LaMelo. The Hornets are not a team that like looks to score out of the post up a lot, right? Like that's just not what they do. The two centers that they have are both really nice. I mean, Mark Williams and Nick Richards are both like very good players. And they're guys that are they're very effective finishing at the hoop. But the Hornets as a team, are scoring under 0.92 points per post-up possession. They almost never post up, according to Synergy. Only 2.2% of their half-court possessions have been used via the post-up. And combined, Richards and Mark Williams have, I'm not even sure. Yeah, those two guys have combined to, I believe, attempt. Let me look at this real quickly. To attempt 6 shots out of a post up so far this season. But
does that account for like a high-low situation? Do you know?
It's tough to say. I don't know. I mean, it should. Like those like duck-ins should count. Maybe those get registered as a cut, but those should, in my opinion, be like when there's like a seal that
right.
should be labeled a post up, in my opinion, at least. That's how I would chart that. But the real strength of this team right now, as far as like offensive personnel goes, is that they have several power wings and hybrid forwards that they can play through: Hayward, Bridges, PJ specifically. And so just looking at Terry Rozier, his shooting numbers, the 3 guys that have assisted Rozier the most so far this season does not include LaMelo Ball. And obviously like injuries have played a role in that, because even when LaMelo was healthy, Terry missed some games. But so far this season, Gordon Hayward has assisted 14 Rozier field goals, most on the team. PJ has assisted 7. Bridges has assisted 4. LaMelo Ball, only 3 assists to Terry Rozier so far this season. But you're just seeing this team play out of the post a little bit more. And on Miles Bridges post-ups, including passes, according to Synergy, the Hornets are scoring 1.44 points per possession. On Gordon Hayward post-up possessions, including a pass, they're scoring 0.96 points per possession on a decent amount of volume. And I think ultimately that's why they can still be like a decent like clutch. If they can get the game into a clutch situation, they can still be pretty effective, because in these half-court situations, they can like kind of still get a pretty good shot. They don't have to turn the ball over. They've got like enough shooters, especially when they've got, at all times they're going to have at least four pretty good shooters on the court, unless Ish is playing, and he's not going to be in the final couple of minutes. So we'll just say that's something to keep an eye on. This team playing out of the post a little bit more as a means to like set up offense, because they don't have like an ace pick and roll creator at the moment without LaMelo.
Yeah, and it kind of to combine your point with Spencer's point, I have noticed that Terry Rozier has been giving the ball up a little bit more frequently early on. And I don't know if that's by design. Like you'll see Brandon Miller take the ball up the court. You'll see Gordon Hayward take the ball.
Yeah.
You'll see Miles Bridges take the ball up the court to get Terry Rozier off the ball. Now, obviously, that doesn't account for Terry Rozier's assist rising, but point, Brian, to get him off ball as quickly as possible, to work out of the elbows, to work out of the post ups with the non bigs, and to get him moving off ball. That's what you're going to have to do when LaMelo's out, and obviously
Yeah.
that's going to be a little bit indefinite as we move forward.
One of the things I wanted to mention when I was referring to these post ups, when they're especially when they're like on the side or sometimes the elbow, especially when they're like mid post, like foul line extended towards the side area, is that Rozier's almost the guy to watch because when Hayward has the ball with his back to the basket or Bridges or PJ, keep an eye on two guys especially where the center Williams or Richards, like what they're doing off the ball when someone else is posting up, and what Rozier is doing, which is often like they're using the 5 to screen for Rozier. So you're seeing those like throwback wiper screens, but you're just seeing them try to get Rozier loose for movement shooting threes or him to like catch and curl and get downhill, but using the post up and Rozier's like off ball screen usage to sort of like unlock some movement and get some looks in the half court. So like those are two guys, again, when these post ups do happen, like Rozier's the guy to like keep an eye on. And again, it's often around, him being wrapped around a screen by either Richards or Williams, who good to see Mark Williams back in the lineup the other night against Toronto.
All right, let's get to the final question and segment here in terms of a listener question from longtime listener Keith in the Slack channel. He said, considering past ownership, injuries, market limitations, etc., how much blame does Mitch Kupchak deserve, and what grade would we give him so far, as his tenure is probably heading to an end? So he started in the summer of 2018. That was the SGA / Miles Bridges draft trade. And it's crazy to think SGA, the way that he's playing, he's probably in consideration for the MVP at this point. But I do wonder, I keep saying this, I do wonder how much of Kemba being on the team led us to, making that trade versus keeping SGA. But I want to throw it to you guys in terms of just like his draft history, his transactional history. Is there a grade that you would give him? How much blame are you going to put on him versus the market? And looking back on some of his previous drafts, just want to go through this real quickly, and I'll pass it to you guys. 2018, that was Miles Bridges. 2019 might have been maybe his best draft. PJ, Cody Martin, Jalen McDaniels. 2020, that's when LaMelo Ball fell in their lap, but they also had Grant Riller and Vernon Carey Jr. Book Night and Kai Jones draft was the year after that in 2021. 2022, that was the Mark Williams draft. That's when they had Jalen Duren as well, or had the chance to decide between the two or keep both. And then I think McGowan's was the second round pick there. And then obviously the most recent draft was Brandon Miller and Nick Smith Jr. So it's a hodgepodge. It's a mixed bag of drafting. And like I said, like Ball obviously is the best player, but they didn't really have a decision to make there. So, any thoughts on Mitch Kupchak's tenure here? I kind of range anywhere from like a C to a C plus. I mean, I think there are some outside factors that he can't control, but I also feel like he could have done a little bit of a better job when it comes to not only drafting but maybe selling off some assets as well.
Oh, well, let's not forget too Devonte Graham, the
Yep.
2018 draft pick. And JT Thor, a second round pick in 2021. There was also the draft night swap with the Pistons in 2021 that brought Mason Plumlee to Charlotte, chewed up some of the Hornets cap space, took them out of, I guess the Rashawn Holmes sweepstakes from that summer, which is something that we were all heavily emotionally invested in, seemingly. Yeah, I think they've made some good, some good picks in both the first and second round, finding guys like McDaniels, Martin, Devonte Graham in the second round have all been like, decent, Nick Richards in the second round. So all been like decent second round picks. So far, I mean, I criticized I thought they should have drafted Scoot, but Miller looks excellent so far. So I think like drafting, they've been okay when they've used the picks, but just like what they did in 2022, whether that was mandated from on high, that they wanted to keep not bring in another like rookie salary so they could max Bridges and then still come in under the tax or whatever, but even before the season started. But trading the 13th pick to get a bunch of draft fodder. I mean, I guess one of those picks turned into Nick Smith this year, but like the 2022 draft is just like an absolute all-time head scratcher. And that coming on the backs of the 2021 draft, where it, unless JT Thor turns into a rotation player, and I still think there's a chance for that, even if it's not in Charlotte, is like, those being the first two drafts after you pick Ball is pretty tough. And if you're wondering like why the roster isn't like built out around LaMelo, where's the depth? Where are the other good young players? I mean, like part of it is because on the two drafts after that, they didn't get as much value out of it as they could have. They whiffed on they whiffed on a lottery pick with Book Knight. And they moved another lottery pick with the 13th pick, which was Jalen Duren. So, and then I don't know. I mean, we could do a full other we could probably do a 45-minute podcast, like fully like litigating the like Kupchak tenure. Obviously, I don't think they've done enough to sort of like find value on the margins. I don't think they've like done a good job re-signing their players, letting guys like Malik Monk walk for nothing. I don't think Mitch has it's not like he hasn't done some decent stuff as far as like trades go, like the signing trade with Devontae Graham in the 2021 offseason. I mean, you lose out on a good young guard, I guess, but you do get the 15th pick out of that. That turns into Mark Williams. I suppose that's something. Maybe he had his hands tied with moving Kemba. Like he sort of arrived Charlotte pretty late in the game. Charlotte has the 2019 All-Star game. Maybe they don't want to move Kemba before that. He ends up at least getting Rozier out of it. And look, if they trade Rozier for some stuff, like maybe that is like, years and years down the road, well, maybe you do squeeze like a little bit of something out of the Kemba situation at down the stretch. But I don't know. I don't think like the roster building has been overall that impressive. The inability to find like secondary ball handlers, backup point guards have been pretty huge failures. I think he had his hands tied often with tough ownership and being in a smaller market. But yeah, I think I'd probably go C-, like Deontay White is saying here in comments a second ago. I think I'd say C- to C too. But I think overall the draft has been okay. It's just when they've actually used the picks, it's been okay. Just 2022 was such a baffling night. So yeah, I'll go C-.
Yeah, I'm fine with the C-. I don't have a ton to add off of what you guys have already said, other than, I think that he worked for an owner that, this is a small market team, and he was working for an owner that probably wasn't as cash rich as a lot of people might expect. And I think they were pitching pennies a lot, which the lack of creativity on the trade market and asset management was poor under Kupchak. There's no question about that. But I also think that sorry, I'm home alone with my kid, for everyone that knows. So I don't have help to bring him somewhere else. But I would kind of put a bow on it with Kupchak. I think he was a pretty good evaluator of talent. And that bore out, over drafts. The one time they got aggressive, with the Kai Jones selection in that draft, none of that paid off. But most of his marching orders were based around saving money. The most recent example with Jalen McDaniels, that's just, here's a great young player that you developed, that you had the bird rights on. You could have signed back for a very reasonable contract, kept in your system, and to sell him for basically nothing is just that is kind of the 50,000 foot like overarching. I'm going to jump off here so the kid can be taken care of. So you guys take this home. Sorry. We made it most of the episode.
Yes, we made it 50 minutes. He did good.
Yeah.
We appreciate everyone joining us today. We always appreciate you guys tuning in to the episode. Please make sure you give us a 5-star rating and written review on Apple Podcast if you would like to do that as well. Especially if you like what we do, That's the easiest way and the quickest way to support us. Also, thanks to all our BuzzBeat Plus subscribers who are able to listen to this early and ad free. We're going to go ahead and wrap here for Spencer and